Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Black Mirror Season 6. In this video, I will cover every episode of Season 6 of Black Mirror. However, I will start this episode with my overall thoughts of the season, and these thoughts in this portion of the episode will be spoiler free. So if you haven't seen the episode, this first part of the video will be mostly safe unless you're like very highly sensitive and want to know nothing about the show coming in. Otherwise, yeah, this first part of the video will be spoiler free. However, when I get into the episodes more in detail, specifically, I will get into spoilers, but I will give a warning for those who haven't seen the show. And also, when I cover each episode, I will cover just the episode. So if you've seen part of the season, not all of it, you are safe to watch the portions of my video that cover particular episodes, as long as you've seen that particular episode. So, anywho, Black Mirror Season 6, I think, was a pretty good season. Probably not one of my favorite seasons, but it's not my least favorite. I do think it is definitely a step up from Season 5, the previous season, but not as good as my favorite seasons like Season 4. But again, everyone's mileage, everyone's opinion on Black Mirror is very different. It's one of the shows where I've seen such varying differences from person to person to person. I think it's the one with the most wildly different opinions on it. And that's mainly because it's an anthology series, but more it appeals to different people. So some people love these episodes, other people hate the episodes that the same people love, and stuff like that, because people can find different things about it that they like. But the thing with Season 6 of Black Mirror is that it kind of takes the show in a different direction, and it's not necessarily the same sort of style that Black Mirror is known for. In fact, creator Charlie Brooker referred to this season as kind of a reboot of sorts, and I can definitely see that where that's coming from. And without, again, not getting into any spoilers or any specifics, I would say that this season leans a lot more into the horror genre than previous seasons had. Now, the seasons have always had a dark, creepy feel to them, and a lot of the episodes I think could be described as thrillers. But I think, I don't know, I never really, I mean, there are some episodes that in the past that you could say have a horror element, such as Playtest and whatnot, but I never really thought of this show as a horror show. In fact, I was watching this review and they referred to it as a, classic horror sci-fi show, but I'm like, is it horror? I don't think it was, but this season kind of is. They definitely lean more into the horror element. Not every episode, of course. There is a lighthearted comedic episode in this bunch that's not really horror, but a lot of the other episodes are. Now, there's one episode I felt was very reminiscent of like a horror thriller, kind of in the genre of like Psycho or whatever, but that I think is typical of Black Mirror, that they've done a lot of these true crime-esque episodes, almost one every season. So this is nothing new for Black Mirror, but that episode did seem a bit more horror-esque than the previous ones in that same sort of true crime genre. However, later in the season, we get not one but two episodes that, in my opinion, lean heavily on the supernatural, monster horror, which is something Black Mirror has never done before. And it was a very odd choice, and I think from what I've seen of the reception so far, is not many people are on board with it. I think, Black Mirror is mostly known for having science fiction that's sort of in near future that takes modern technology, internet, iPhones, what have you, and takes it to the logical conclusion. Like, speculates, well, if technology keeps advancing in this way, what could it possibly lead to? And of course, Black Mirror often combines that with portraying the worst of humanity. But Charles Brooker himself had made it clear that Black Mirror was not a show about how technology is terrible, but how humans are terrible and how they could use technology in really terrible ways. But I didn't really find that's what this season is about. Now, arguably, there are 2 episodes that do kind of fit the bill in that regard, but in kind of a different way than what previous seasons had done. And again, 3 episodes that don't really rely on that. And also, Black Mirror, up until the movie Bandersnatch, Black Mirror was infamous for every episode being set either in the present or the future. There was never any episode set into the past, and they made a really big deal out of Bandersnatch, which, by the way, I love that, because that was set in the 80s. However, this season features not 1, not 2, but 3 episodes set in the past. Which, again, I loved Bandersnatch. I didn't mind that they set that in the past, but having the majority of the season take place in the past and not the present or future. In fact, I think one of the episodes was the present, so only 1 was in the near future, is a different direction. And if this is to be a reboot of sorts and taking the show in a different direction, I'm not particularly looking forward to that. I'm not really happy about that because I don't really want the show to go in a different direction. I don't want it to lean more into horror-esque episodes that take place in the past. I'd rather they continue on the same sort of making critique of modern day technology and following it to what it might lead to. I mean, because there's no other show that does this, or at least does it as well as Black Mirror does. So I miss it, and that's what I count on Black Mirror for. And if they're going to deliver these fantastical monster horrors instead, it's kind of a different show. And some people were saying, one episode in particular felt like they were watching American Horror Story. And I don't really want to watch a show like that. I want to watch a show like Black Mirror. That being said, I didn't hate the season. As I said, I did enjoy it. Even the episodes that had a genre I didn't particularly care for had strong character stories and strong social commentary, which has always been present in Black Mirror. So I'm not saying these are terrible episodes at all by any stretch of the imagination. It's just taking it in a interesting direction, which I don't personally think they should go in. But still has a quality writing, quality acting, quality production value, and very strong characters, which is the main thing I care about. So I still enjoyed the season overall. So that is going to be it for my spoiler-free thoughts on the season. So if you haven't seen the season yet, you should probably tune out now until such a time as you had. I am going to go through each episode in order. I will put timestamps below if you've only seen some episodes and not others, so you could skip over the ones that you haven't seen, because I'm not going to spoil other episodes when I'm talking about a particular episode. So once I get into the part of the episode, as long as you've seen that episode, you will be safe from spoilers from the rest of the season. But anyway, so let me start with the first episode, Joan is Awful. So it's interesting that these first 2 episodes actually take a stab at Netflix. This one in particular. Like the other one, just kind of makes commentary. You can sort of examine the ins and outs, the goods and the bads, the positives and negatives. Where this one just flat out attacks Netflix. And you know, you could say it's not just Netflix that's attacking those, all sort of social media. It has strong commentary on social media that steals your private information and how you sign away those super long 5-page documents of terms and agreements that nobody reads and just skips over and presses the accept button and not really realizing what they're accepting. And sure, so it makes strong commentary on that, and also the effect that Netflix has on, particularly when they do like documentaries or shows based off of real people. I'm thinking documentaries like The Tiger King, or shows, fictional shows, but based off of true events like Dahmer, which was very controversial, and how this could have a negative effect on the people depicted in these shows and basically destroy their lives, and have a lot of people thinking, because these shows, particularly Tiger King, but a lot of these other shows and documentaries do not portray these people in a very positive light. And so in real life, they have massive amount of people who go watch the show and now think that these people are terrible, horrible people, and like send them mails or whatever, emails, or just walking down the street, they could be getting nasty looks. And so this addresses stuff like that as well. And of course it does it in a very quirky, tongue-in-cheek way. This is the one comedy episode, obviously, that I was referring to that is kind of lighthearted. It's kind of, I wouldn't say it's like heavy comedy the way like Hang the DJ was. It's more, to me, it's more in the lines of something like USS Callister. That's still plot heavy, still having to do with characters, and still has an element of story and suspense to it, but also just really tongue-in-cheek and silly, and of course making commentary along the way. And I did of course find the aspect of it interesting, of this person going home and turning on, well, I was about to say Netflix, but it's actually Streamberry, which is a very obvious stand, and they even have the icon at the start of the show has the exact same sign as Netflix, and has an S appear the same way Netflix has their N appear. But anyway, so it's obvious what the commentary is here. But to go home and watch it as a show on the streaming service with her boyfriend or fiance, and then have the events of her life of that particular day that she spent shown on the screen for everyone to see. Now again, this is a very blatant sort of commentary on how our privacy is being invaded by a lot of streaming, like social media and everything. So that part was kind of really relatable. It's an interesting concept. You do really feel for the person. And again, this is like done for comedic effect, so it's really tongue-in-cheek. But there was a few things that I thought were maybe just too ridiculous. Like the whole thing with the terms and agreement. Like, I take that as kind of a parody thing, because it's making fun of the fact that nobody reads these things and just press accept, and what the fuck are they accepting to? But its use here I didn't find particularly realistic. But then again, some people might find me naive for thinking that, but I don't know. But the thing that really got to me, though, is the scene where she went to her lawyer, and her lawyer was basically like, I'm sorry, you're fucked. There's nothing I can do to help you. That is what I totally didn't buy. Now, let me be clear. I didn't buy that Streamberry would have an airtight contract, that there's no legal way that she could get out of it. What I didn't buy is the fact that the lawyer didn't even fucking try. I would be fine if they went to court and the judge ruled, nope, this contract is airtight, you're screwed, you gotta live with it. But there's no way the lawyer would just laugh her out of her office like that. I mean, again, maybe I'm naive and don't know much, but from what I've read and watched about real-life lawyers, they would try. And I think they would take it to the media, and because I was watching it, are outraged about what's happening. And people also watching it would be outraged in real life, and they would gain like support in the movement. And how dare they do this? And even if Streamberry won their court case, there would still be a huge black backlash against Streamberry. And again, some people may think I'm being naive, but based on what I've seen, I think that's absolutely true. And some people say, oh, there's no black backlash against these social media groups that invade your privacy. But there is. I've known tons of people who've deleted Facebook, who don't use certain social media sites anymore and use stuff like VPN to avoid their privacy being invaded. And you might say, oh, that's only a small minority. Well, that's because, but what's depicted in this episode is way far more intrusive than at least what we're aware of in present day. So yeah, if they took it to this extreme, the backlash would be way bigger than what it is in present day. So, and the fact that nobody seemed to give a shit and they all were like, oh, well, you're fucked. Yeah, I mean, again, it's tongue-in-cheek. They're doing it to make commentary, and it's supposed to be, like, comedic. So I'm not saying that it ruins the episode or anything, but it still rubs me the wrong way. And I think, yeah, well, that's just too silly for me. And the other thing, and the other commentary, actually, I should talk about that it makes this episode particularly relevant when it aired, because I'm sure the writer's strike was not happening when this was being written, obviously. But it happens to be aired during the writer's strike, and the writer's strike was all about how studios are trying to erase writers or not pay them enough or not use them enough and maybe try to eliminate them and give their jobs to AI, which is exactly what's happening in this episode, where they had the supercomputer that just takes someone's life verbatim, and so they don't need a writer. And also it's relates to reality shows and how a lot of networks start using reality shows a lot more because they're cheaper. Again, they don't have to use writers, and well, some of them do anyway because they're not really reality. But anyway, they're cheaper. It's, oh, let's show someone's real life, and it's easier and whatever, and it degrades the quality of fiction, of shows and films, and that was definitely depicted here as well. But again, could be being naive, but a lot of comments that I saw about this episode actually is exactly what I was thinking while I was watching, is why doesn't she just destroy her phone? If they're getting all this information from her to make the show from their phone listening into her, why doesn't she just destroy it? Now people say, well, maybe there's computers everywhere, like there's some in her office, some other people she talked with have a phone, they copy it, but then the other people's devices are random devices, maybe like the ones that are work wouldn't be connected to Streamberry, like people wouldn't watch Streamberry at her work, and maybe other people with phones don't watch Streamberry or have the. So I don't know. Again, I could be being naive, but it does seem like maybe that would help. Maybe it wouldn't stop them, and maybe it would help a bit. But she didn't even try that. I don't know. And yeah, so. Then when she goes to the Streamberry office and destroys a supercomputer, and we find out that it's level upon level upon level, and they have Michael Cera explain that they're on the second level because there's multiple different universes, because she's not even the real Joan. The real Joan, she's like, was based off her and whatever, because she's actually the actress that's actually portraying her. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't hate it, but I could have done it without it. That seemed a bit silly to me and unnecessary, confusing. Like multiverse within this computer. Like, it seems like they're just jumping on the multiverse bandwagon for no good reason. Like, having level upon level. Like, why? What's the point of that? I've no real person's actually going to see any of those other fictional levels. They're just going to see this first level that we're watching here. Only the fictional computer parts are going to see those other levels. So I don't know. I don't even want to think about it. I think that's just unnecessary, and I don't know. It was a bit silly that they had this super complex computer at a streaming service. But again, tongue in cheek, and I get that. So that's why I don't totally hate this episode. So. Or even hate it at all. I actually quite like it. So my rating for Joan is Awful out of 10, I'm going to give this an 8. I think I like the commentary it makes. I like the guts that the Black Mirror is making fun of the streaming service that they're on. It reminds me a lot of the Simpsons constantly made fun of Fox all the time. Yeah, it is tongue-in-cheek, so I'm willing to forgive some of these things that I think maybe or plot contrivances, but not enough to where I'd give it more than an 8, but it was enjoyable. I was into it. I thought the characters were well written and the comedy worked for it. So yeah, decent episode. So next episode is Loch Henry, and this one, I'll just say it right now, was my favorite of the season. This again was the one I was referring to before that was very typical of the true crime type episodes that Black Mirror went. So it did feel like something Black Mirror has done before, but I think this is one of the best versions of that. And it did, as I said, felt very horror thriller-esque, particularly towards the end when Pia found out that her boyfriend's mother, that she was alone with in the house, had done some gruesome, torturous, disgusting, like beyond imaginably disgusting murders, and that she had the evidence for it, and the whole way that played out was so good. But again, I like the way this episode plays out. I think it's well paced. Because at first I didn't think I'd like this. I was like, oh, some guy, bringing home a black girlfriend to his mother who's kind of racist and doesn't understand it's something kind of done before, and these people don't really seem that interesting. But then as they start to go on, and I like how we didn't even get the information about the murders that took place in the town until like way later in the episode. I thought that was a very interesting way to sort of disseminate this information, and it allowed you to get to know these characters and then flesh these characters out. It got you to get to care about these characters, particularly when Davis, the main guy, and his girlfriend Pia met Davis's old friend Podrick, the actor who played Podrick from Game of Thrones. I guess his name was Stewart, but anyway, I saw him, I was like, hey, it's Podrick. But anyway, Black Mirror continuing its tradition of using Game of Thrones actors. But anyway, so you got to care about these characters, and it was interesting that Pia was, they were supposed to do a documentary on some guy protecting eggs, but when she found out about this, murder, she's like, this is what we should do. We should do this instead. And Davis wasn't on board with this, of course, because this is like very sensitive. It's a real life thing that happened to him, and it has to do with his own life and everything. And so at first was kind of rejecting it, but Stewart was on board with it from the start because he had own self-interest, because a documentary might revitalize tourism in this town, and his bar they're thinking about having to shut it down because they're not getting any business whatsoever. And so he's kind of self-motivated, self-interest, and so is Pia, because she wants to be this big movie maker, and so does Davis, but he doesn't want to do it over. It's like too sensitive to talk about stuff like this. His father was shot and died in the hospital about this incident, so it touches a little bit too close to home, and it's like people in their town were murdered, so it's not something he really wants to delve up and relive. But ultimately he lets Pia convince her, because he also has that strive to be this movie maker. Now the commentary here was interesting because it also talks about how these true life documentaries or true crime documentaries are very, very popular. Like, there's a throwaway line when Patrick is talking about, oh, did you see that one on Netflix? And she's like, you're going to have to narrow that down because there's so many of them. And it's also interesting they specifically mentioned Netflix, but there's also Streamberry in this episode. But anyway, so yeah, it touches on how this is such a popular genre, so PS sees this as no one's really going to care about a documentary about some guy protecting eggs, but if they do something that's hot topic, something that people love to watch, and so it makes commentary on how a lot of again, getting back to somewhat what the first episode touched on, is about how some people's lives are ruined or touched on, or sensitive topics are uncovered and recovered and explored because it's an easy way to make money, because it's really popular. So and again, this is what I was talking about before, how this episode kind of explores sort of the positives and negatives, because you can see Pia's perspective, but you can also see Stuart's dad's perspective on how, like, you shouldn't do this. This is just going to make things worse. This could ruin some people's lives, which we see it clearly does by the end of the episode. And so it's very interesting, the dynamic commentary that it makes on these true crime documentaries. And then, of course, we get the big twist reveal at the end of the episode, which I thought was amazing, and as I already mentioned, led to one of the most intense suspense thriller scenes, I think, in the entire show. I was clearly on the edge of my seat. It was so intense. Now, I will say that, and I'm sure I'm not alone. I'm not claiming to be a super genius or anything. I think probably everyone who was watching it felt this way. But I will say that when they had the scene where he got in the car accident, he was in the hospital, and then Pia went home with her mother, I predicted pretty early on in that scene what was going to happen, that it was going to be revealed that his parents were involved in the gruesome murders. And so as the scene went on, I was like, when she was watching the videotape that they had filmed, because they had taped over, his mother had those stupid shows that she would watch with the guy who had a nice ass or whatever. When she was watching, the footage they filmed, I'm like, and she was like doing some exercises, and I'm like, I knew that the portion that they filmed would end, and the tape would keep going, and it would reveal that his parents were actually involved in the tortures and the gruesome murders, and that's exactly what happened. So I knew that's what was going to happen, but that didn't diminish it at all. It was to me, if anything, it made everything more suspense. And I think the way they were like cutting between that and the scene with Stuart's dad being creepy at the hospital, saying, "Oh, I knew it all along, but I have no proof," and the creepy music they were playing, that made it even more clear to me. Especially how they kept cutting to Davis's mom chopping dinner up or whatever. I'm like, yeah, they're definitely hanging heavily. She's the murderer for sure. But here's an interesting question I would pose. In the scene where Pia runs away and Davis's mom is yelling and saying, "I won't hurt you," do you think she's lying and just an attempt to lure her back? Or do you think she's sincere? Because, and again, some might call me naive, but I think she's sincere, because those murders and tortures she committed were over 30 years ago, and with her husband and that other weird dude. Apparently they were having some sort of threesome thing going on, and those two are long dead, and those events are long behind her. I think she's probably a changed person. But of course, no one's going to care about that, and her life will be destroyed if that comes out. So I think generally she was just desperate to talk to her, to try to convince her not to tell anyone. I don't think her plan was to kill her. But I do understand Pia's reaction of being not trusting that and being completely freaked out and terrified of her. I think that's completely natural and understandable. But, if I had one complaint about the episode is that the scene where Pia just slips in that stream she was walking in and dies. That seems kind of cliche for Black Mirror. It reminds me of episodes like White Christmas when people, like when that girl just walked out in the snow and died and never came back. Like, it seems like just people die, and maybe Crocodile a bit too, and I don't know, but it just seems like people just die way too easily. And that was kind of plot conveniency thingy in order to kill her off. And so I kind of wish they didn't do that, but again, it made the ending more powerful. But it was kind of just like, oh, let's just throw her in and she dies while she's running away. But yeah, and then she hangs herself and leaves the tapes. This is why I think she was genuine in saying that she actually wasn't going to hurt her, because she could still try to destroy the tapes. She could try to hide. Now, she thinks that Pia's run off and told everyone about it, but Pia has no evidence, so she could destroy all the, which is actually what I thought she would do, be like destroy all the tapes. And if Pia went off and told other people, she's like, nah, she doesn't know what the hell she's talking about. She's a liar. And Pia would have no evidence to back that up with. But instead, she, leaves the evidence in a nice little neat pile right for her son to find. And like, I hope your movie's successful. And then kills herself. And god damn it. That is fucking dark. But then, of course, you get the ending at the BAFTA Awards, and of course, Podrick is over the moon because his bar is completely filled. The tourism is great, and everyone's wearing those creepy masks that his mother wore while she tortured people to death. And again, that's making commentary about how kind of fucked up that is, but you realize that stuff like that happens in real life. And so he's over the moon, but you see Davis when he's at the BAFTA Awards, and that's what they even mentioned at the start of the episode. Oh, you're going to be this big, huge filmmaker and get BAFTA Awards, and he does. Everything he wanted to become true happens, but his life is fucking ruined. And it kind of is, and again, this is kind of the irony I think Black Mirror does so well. And it kind of gets back to the saying is, be careful what you wish for, you just might get it. So I think, yeah. And again, it has a commentary about how his true life events is his finding out his mother was his mass murderer, and that she killed herself. Not just his mother's parents, mother and father, but his mother killed herself over it, and his girlfriend died because of this, and his whole life is ruined. And but he has this award, he gets all this stuff he wanted, but he's sort of shoved aside, has the Streamberry executive just literally steps right in front of him when the actress is talking about being in a fictional adaptation of it. And again, this is making commentary and stuff like Dahmer, having a fictional adaptation of these horrific events that directly ruined his life, shown for everyone play acting and having fun with it. It's gotta feel like shit to him. In fact, I almost expected him to kill himself when he was in that hotel room, but goddamn, this is a dark ending, very, very powerful commentary. So I absolutely love this episode. So my rating for Loch Henry out of 10 is a 9, and a very strong 9 at that. I thought this was excellent. Alright, so the next episode is Beyond the Sea, and this is my clear least favorite episode of the season, which may surprise some people because I actually looked this up on IMDb, and currently it was the highest rated episode of the season, which I disagree with. Now, let me be clear about this episode, because I don't think this is a straight up bad, terrible episode, but this is one of those episodes or shows or movies that could have been great had they just done things a bit differently, because a lot of the great elements are there. The characters are really interesting, the story is really interesting, the acting is great, the music is great. There's just a couple of missteps in the script that ruined it for me, and to me that's almost worse than something that's just outright bad from the beginning. That's just a bad episode or a bad movie. It's more frustrating to have something that's actually a good movie or a good episode, but they do a stupid, plot point or something dumb with the script that ruins it, that makes it bad, and that's more frustrating to me. And for me, what I mean by that, when I'm talking about specifically with this episode, is the ending. And usually it is the ending that ruins it. And why this ending ruins the episode for me is because it is abrupt. It ends, let me put it this way. The story that would happen after the credits roll, I'm more interested to see that story than I was in half of the episode that I did see. And that's because this episode was very slow paced. And again, I wouldn't have an issue with that if it had a decent ending. But the fact that it had all these scenes and all these moments that stretched on longer than they should have, and they wasted all this time on stuff you don't need, and then cut the episode short right before we get to the part that we do need, that is very frustrating for me. So I liked everything about the main plot. The events that happened, it's just they dragged it out too long. So if they just tighten it up, tighten the script, and not made it so slow paced, I think it would have been great. Because again, the characters were there. The situation where the guy's family is murdered, and he has to, he's going insane, and Cliff, played by Aaron Paul, as realized he's dependent on this other guy for his life, and so he doesn't want him to go insane, so he lets him use his replica to go back to Earth. But this guy's kind of damaged from what happened to his family, and he starts hitting on Cliff's wife, and of course that creates strife between the two of them, and then Cliff forbids him from ever going back to Earth, and this would drive him completely insane. So he tricks Cliff into going out in the spaceship, and he goes back and uses the replica to go back and kill Cliff's family. Now here is the thing. All that was great, and I think very interesting, very, very compelling, very dark, obviously, but very dynamic and interesting thriller, and I was totally on board with that. But then when Cliff gets back, what's his name, Dave, just pulls out a chair, and then the credits roll. I'm like, what the fuck? I need to see what happens after he pulls out that chair. And not only that, is that I think what should have happened, would have been the natural conclusion for these characters as portrayed in this episode, is Cliff should have had murdered Dave. Now I know what everyone's first thought is going to be is they stated very clearly earlier in the episode that Cliff will die without Dave, that this is a two-person job on the spaceship, and that's the whole reason why Cliff let Dave use his replica and go back to Earth in the first place, is because his life depended on Dave. So if he killed Dave, then he too would die later on, because he needs the other person to run the spaceship. And I'm sure that's what they were heavily implying at the end of this episode. And for that argument, I want to actually make an analogy to the movie Avengers Infinity War. Because one of the biggest issues I had with Avengers, I had many issues with it, by the way. I don't like it as much as many people did. But one of the biggest issues I had was the scene where Star-Lord beats up Thanos. Because Iron Man and Mantis were about to take off Thanos' glove, in which case without the Infinity Glove they could easily kill him. But Star-Lord finds out that Thanos killed his girlfriend, so he starts punching Thanos, and this allows Thanos to break free of Mantis and Iron Man and eventually kill everyone and win the day. And I totally do not buy, and never will, buy Star-Lord's motivation. Now, I heard a counter-argument from people who are wrong, who say that, oh, well, Star-Lord is totally within his character because he's just crazy with anger and rage. He's not thinking logically. He just wants to beat the shit out of Thanos. But I don't buy that for a single goddamn second, because even in that enraged, insane state, Star-Lord knows the difference between helping and hurting someone. He just found out this guy murdered the woman he loved. He wants to hurt him, he doesn't want to help him, and he's going to know the difference between that. So rather than attacking Thanos and punching him, which allows him to break free and win, he would actually help Iron Man take the fucking glove off. He's like, here, oh, you motherfucker, here, let me get this goddamn glove off so I can kill you. Get the glove off, and then beat him to a fucking pulp, and then murder him, because without the glove, he would be able to do that. And there's no one would have convinced me otherwise that that's not the case. Now, why do I bring that up here in this episode? Well, because ironically, those people who are wrong about Star-Lord, who thought, oh, it's totally within his character to do that, which it absolutely is not. That argument that they make for that instance, for why Star-Lord wouldn't give a shit and just start attacking Thanos, even though it's wrong in that situation, is actually correct as it applies to this episode of Black Mirror. Because in this particular case, Cliff is not going to give one flying fuck about his life later on. Like, he's not going to be thinking logically. He's not going to be thinking, oh, I better not kill Dave, otherwise I'm going to die later on. No, he's not going to be thinking about anything. It's like, this motherfucker just killed my family. I'm going to fucking kill him. And this would be definitely consistent with his character, because when he found out Dave was hitting on his wife and smacked his son, his reaction was to freak the fuck out and, like, pin him against the wall. And so you can't tell me that he would go back and see that this guy murdered his family and not go back and simply kill the fuck out of him. There's no way he wouldn't do that. It doesn't matter the fact that, his life depends on it. He's not going to be thinking about that. And the difference between, and why my stance is different from the Star-Lord thing to this thing, is because Star-Lord knows the difference between, it's not that he's worried about his own life. He would just know the difference between hurting and helping Thanos. In this situation, it's not so much that he's going to help Dave by attacking him and trying to kill him. He's not going to help him at all. It's more of, he's going to put his own life in danger, which he's not going to give a fuck about. And if that was the case with Star-Lord, it would be the same thing. If the downside of Star-Lord attacking Thanos is that he might die, he'd fucking do it too. Then I would buy it. And so in this case, I think that that Cliff would not give two fucks about his own life. He wouldn't even be thinking. That thought would not occur to him. He would just be thinking, kill this motherfucker, and that's it. And not only that, it's not just that this would make more sense for the story and for the characters. Also, it would be a way better ending. It would be such a good ending. Like, imagine this. So Cliff comes back from his VR trip where he found his, family was murdered, and he sees Dave sitting there, and Dave pushes the chair out, and he just goes over there and fucking kills him, and like strangles him to death and beats the shit out of him until he's dead. And you can see the look of like pure rage and anger and tears and anguish on Cliff's face as he kills Dave and just like rips him to shed. And it would be sort of symmetry because his hands would be all bloody just as they were when he just visited the replica. And after he kills Dave is sitting there lying dead, and he looks down, and then it hits him. Then he realizes, oh fuck, I'm fucked now. That's because he wasn't even considering that before, but then it hits him at that moment. I'm going to die now because I need two people to operate the ship, and now I'm alone. And then you cut to later, like a week or a month later, something goes wrong in the spaceship. The oxygen is depleting, and he can't do shit about it because Dave is now dead. And so he's just sitting there drinking vodka or whatever with tears in his eyes as he's like, all right, well, I guess I'm going to die now. And then he dies. That would be a great ending. That would be an ending that would be very true to Black Mirror and very sort of dark and fucked up. And so had they have done that, I probably would have given this episode a 10 out of 10. I would have loved it. But not only did they not do that, they didn't do anything. Like, they could have, like, just had, maybe Cliff didn't kill him. Maybe they had a conversation. Maybe they were talking and Dave pissed him off and then he killed him. Or maybe he didn't kill them. Or maybe there was this strong tension between them and they were fucking hating each other, being stuck on this ship. Like, those are interesting aspects too. I wouldn't have liked it as much as the ending I just described. I think that's clearly would have been the best ending, but that still would have been something. Like, but what we got was nothing. They just cut the episode off. And so there was a half-hour bullshit, slow-paced nonsense we didn't need that they could have cut in order for them to show what we absolutely did need to see. So, and I know it's inevitable some people will have this opinion, and that's fair. You know, everyone has their own opinion and everything, so that's fine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm sure it's inevitable some people have the opinion that, well, it's more dynamic, it's more, it's more powerful that they just cut it off there. And it's fair if you feel that way, but I very strongly, absolutely do not feel that way. Absolutely not. And it bothers me, and I think, quite frankly, ruins the entire episode. It does, in my humble opinion. But the other thing about this episode is, and this threw me off at first, and this kind of really bothered me, that this was actually set in the 60s. It was set in 1969, but it was this alternate version. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, this, what kind of alternate reality would have this super high-tech technology that allows them to go back into a replica in 1969? Like, I don't know. That just seemed unnecessary. Like, why not just set it in the future? I would have liked it better if they'd done that. Like, having it in place, not only was it not set in the future, it was set in the past. Like over 50 years ago or whatever. And I was like, why? Like, I don't know. I hated that aspect of it. And also the obvious commentary of the Manson family, the weird cult that just broke. That was very random, and just say, oh, it's just like what the Manson family did to the Sharon Tate. But that, I don't know, it felt very unoriginal, and I didn't really care for that aspect of it either. So, but if it had a good ending, I wouldn't care about those things. But anyway, my rating for Beyond the Sea, it's gonna be a 4. Poor. I gotta give it at least a 4 because the acting, the quality was so good, and the bones were there for it to be a good episode, but they blundered it and didn't do it properly. So yeah, this is easily my least favorite episode of the season. So next episode, I'll talk about is everyone else's least favorite episode of the season, and that is Mazey Day. And I've heard people, this is easily the lowest rated episode on IMDb. In fact, it's the lowest rated episode of the entire show on IMDb. And I've heard so far people attack it and rip it to shreds. And I kind of liked it. And this is consistent because my favorite episode of season 5, the one with Miley Cyrus, which I love, is actually one of my favorites of the whole show. That's the second lowest rated on IMDb, and everyone else ripped at it to shreds and thought that was shit. But I was gonna say, but for different reasons, but it's pretty much the same reason actually, just applied differently. And that reason being, it doesn't feel like Black Mirror, and it's not really what Black Mirror does. In the case of the Miley Cyrus episodes, it was too happy and bright and felt more like a Disney movie, whereas in this case, they're doing a fucking werewolf show. And now, to be fair, I wasn't a big fan of the werewolf aspect either. And again, as I mentioned at the start of my video, I don't really want them to go in this horror direction. And I hope they stray away from it. And I'd rather them get back to making dark commentary on modern day technology and predicting where it might go in the future. And this, as I said, there were 3 episodes taking place in the past. The one I just talked about, Beyond the Sea, was 69. The next one, taking place in 79, that's in the title. And this one, I would guess it's either the early 2000s or the late 90s. I think it's the early 2000s. I think that's when the paparazzi, tabloid magazine stuff was at its sort of height. But I could be wrong about that. But she was using a dial-up internet connection, so it was clearly set in the past, either the 90s or the 2000s. But anyway, yeah. So I didn't really care for the fact that it was a horror episode about the werewolf, and I hope that Black Mirror doesn't do more of that. But I think this was a very strong character story. I think Zazie Beetz did an amazing job as Bo, and I think the script did an amazing job getting me to care about Bo, to identify with Bo and her strife. And I love how she had that nervous roommate who hated confrontation. Like, I felt so bad for that guy too. And it also made very strong commentary. Like, I watched this one review that trashed this episode that said, oh, well, this doesn't really have any commentary other than paparazzi is bad. It has way more commentary than that. That is a much too simplistic way to look at this episode. It's very complex the way it examines the issue, because the thing with paparazzi is something I've always hated, always considered paparazzi to be scum of the earth. And because that's partly because I have zero interest in these tabloid magazines and tabloid shit. I give celebrity gossip, shit like that. Like, I don't care about celebrity gossip. I give 2 shits about celebrity gossip. And the fact that these people are invading these other people's privacies and destroying their lives and hunting them down just, so people can have their celebrity gossip. I think that's fucking disgusting. But this episode humanizes one of those people who are doing it. Has Bo is actually a good person. I think it's actually a powerful way how they start the episode, where she takes pictures of this, guy, celebrity, who is having an affair with another man, even though he's married. How that ruins his life, and he begs her not to take those photos, but she ignores them, and he ends up killing himself. And so this drives her to quit the industry, because she was completely fucked up by this. And then her colleagues, like the one dude who cares about her, is trying to be like, oh, don't worry about it, it's not your fault. Where the other guys, like the slime ball, who do represent like the stereotypical paparazzi that I think of when I think of paparazzi, we're like, oh, fuck him, it doesn't matter. He asked for it by being a celebrity, which is, the common trope that you get. And I thought that was a very powerful way. And it showed how, without that job, though, that she couldn't pay her rent, and that her life was turning into financial ruin, and it was downturning. And then she was given this lifeline. And all she got to do is take this picture of this one celebrity, and she would get a huge payday. And so she grabs onto it and goes after it. And it ends up backfiring on her. And I think that's a very interesting dynamic. And also, we show that she is a human and she does care about people, because when she finds Mazey Day locked and chained up, she assumes, oh, she's just a drug addict and these people are abusing her, and her first instinct is to help her, rather than while her colleagues are just sitting there busy taking pictures for the payday. She is a humanitarian first, and I think that's interesting and speaks strongly about her character. It also adds a nice little complex dynamic to it when you consider the ending, where she does turn into Mazey Day turns into a werewolf and starts killing everyone, and they're trapped in this diner and she kills everyone, and then she shoots her a couple times, and then Mazey Day turns back into her normal self, but she's just saying kill me. But instead of killing her, Bo hands her the gun and takes pictures of Mazey Day while she kills herself. So obviously she's going to get a humongous fucking payday, and maybe even win all these awards and shit and become a famous celebrity herself for taking these pictures. Rather than being the humanitarian helping her, she profits off of Mazey Day's pain. Now, there's a lot of complexity to that, though, because Mazey Day was a werewolf and she wanted to die. She was asking to die. But again, she helped with this assisted suicide. But again, she's a werewolf who just murdered all these people. So I don't know how much sympathy Bo should have for her. But of course, she didn't ask to be a werewolf. But yeah, I thought that was a really rich, dark, complex, thought-provoking ending, where she takes the pictures and she kills herself. And I don't mind. There's more story to tell, but unlike the previous episode, I don't mind them ending it there, because you can kind of imply in your mind where this. I have no problem with implying in my mind in this situation where the story would go after this, and I think this is a good, strong place to end it. But yeah, the werewolf aspect, when I first saw that she was a werewolf, I'm like, what? Black Mirror is doing werewolves? What the fuck is this? And I think most people who absolutely hate this episode can't get past that. And I understand that, because that was my reaction at first too. But then when I saw how powerful the character story was and how powerful the commentary was, I am sort of able to look past that, but I still hope they don't go in this direction. I still don't want to see any more Black Mirror episodes about werewolves. Please go back to doing stuff about technology. But that being said, I still really like this episode. So my rating for Mazey Day out of 10 is an 8. Extremely good, I think. I can't give it more than 8 because of the werewolf bullshit, but I mean, it was really good what they did with it. And so finally we get to the last episode of the season, which is Demon 79. They presented it more like a film, like the opening credits treated it more like a film. And I heard a rumor a year or two ago that season 6 of Black Mirror was all going to be movies, that they wanted to do like Bandersnatch, but for every episode. Now clearly they didn't do that, but I think that they did that with the last episode. However, there's previous seasons, like Black Museum in season 4 was an extra long episode, but it wasn't presented as a movie the way that this one was. But at the same time, it's not its own separate thing on Netflix. Like Bandersnatch is not in the Black Mirror episode list. It's considered, you have to go to the movie section of Netflix to watch it, and this is in the and considered an episode of Black Mirror, kind of like White Christmas is as well. So it's, not exactly the same thing. But again, so this episode gets back to the supernatural horror element. And when I found that that's what this episode would be, is about a demon saying, hey, you gotta kill 3 people, 3 human sacrifices, or else the world's gonna end. That's not a very interesting premise to me, and I think a lot of the episode was about them going around him saying, hey, you're going to kill this person, hey, kill that person, why don't you kill this person, kill that person. I think kind of tedious, although this episode, there's definitely comedic elements to this, but this is definitely way more dark than stuff like USS Callister or Joan is awful, even though USS Collector is definitely dark in its own way too. This is way more sort of fucked up and dark, but there's a tongue-in-cheek way that they have, the demon take on the form of Boney M and is like in this bright, like sort of fluffy disco outfit going on. Hey mate, why don't you kill that person? Like there's something very comedic about that, but and I did, and again, this featured a very strong character. Like you really got to empathize with the main character of this episode, and see that she wasn't really a good person, but they did make a point of showing before the demon appeared that she had, these enraged thoughts and fantasies about killing her co-workers and stuff like that. But you understood where she was coming from because she was being discriminated against. There was also obviously a lot of racism towards her and shit that she was dealing with for living in London, being sort of... I think they did state that she was Indian in this episode, although I don't know if that was true or not. But anyway, being a non-white person, a person of color in London in 1979, and how she had to deal with a lot of racism and shit. So you empathize with her a lot, and how she didn't really want to kill innocent people. Like the first person she killed was the someone who father was abusing a daughter, and then the next guy she killed was a guy who killed his wife, and she didn't want to kill his brother who was actually innocent, nothing wrong, but she sort of had to in the moment, and that was like really intense, and how she hated doing that. And then I loved how at the end the third person she killed, like that the demon was trying to convince her to kill the cop or her co-worker, but she's like, no, it's got to be this politician. And I love how she like forced the demon to show the politician's future, and he ends up becoming like this terrible prime minister. They tie into like Metalhead here because he's it kind of implies he's the one responsible for unleashing these military dogs that result in the apocalypse. So you could say this is how these episodes are connected, although the way this episode ends, it's hard to say that they're connected because the whole fucking world ends. But anyway, but yeah, he's just like the racist, definitely derivative of Trump and other politicians who feed off of xenophobia and hate in order to gain popularity, and he's responsible for a lot of race hate and wars and possibly even the apocalypse itself. And I love how the demon is like, oh, but my boss, my people really don't want you to kill him because they really like this guy because, his boss is Satan and he's going to be responsible for a lot of death, but he's still not technically against the rules to kill him because he hasn't murdered anyone yet. And I found that actually really powerful, how she was fixated on killing him. But I didn't really care for the ending with the cop stopping her from killing him, and then she was telling her story, and they're like, oh yeah, she's just crazy, and then the world ends, and the demon's gonna be, exiled to oblivion, and she agrees to go with them. I mean, there's something kind of, ironic or sort of funny or interesting about that ending, but I don't know, it seemed a bit too silly to me. Now, as far as it depicting the apocalypse and the end of the world, so how I know some people theorize that all the Black Mirror episodes are all taking place in the same universe, and they try to create a timeline. I'm not on board with that, honestly. I think they just love throwing Easter eggs from other episodes and certain episodes. I've seen people try to connect it and create an ultimate timeline, and it doesn't hold up. And how would Beyond the Sea fit into that? Because that takes place in the alternate 60s. And how would this episode fit into that? Because the whole world ends in 1979. The majority of Black Mirror episodes take place well after that. So unless you're saying that the world didn't actually end and then this was just a delusion in her mind, and she was just comatose in the hospital in real life, but in her mind, she's living her life in oblivion with this demon. But there was too much specific information about the demon for me to believe that the demon never existed and was just a delusion, which is what I think the episode was trying to tell you towards the end. But I never believed that, because that just wouldn't add up. Like, how would she know all these certain things? But I don't know. And also the other thing I was wondering through this episode is, was the demon lying to her about the stuff that she was saying? He could have been full of shit, but I think, again, the ending was implying that he was not lying to her. So it was interesting. It was interesting commentary. It's kind of interesting thought experiment, but there wasn't enough meat on this bones. Like, just having someone having to kill people before, or else the world will end, and the world does end. I don't know. It just didn't really do it for me. And again, I don't really want Black Mirror to be about a demon going around convincing someone to kill people. And as the fact that this was done in the same style, especially the opening sequence, as a typical horror movie from the 70s, that doesn't do it for me at all. Like, I give zero fucks about that. I'm not interested in 70s horror or stuff that's recreating and acting like it, like Tarantino does it a lot, or like Stranger Things does the 80s. Zero interest in that, so that didn't get me on board with this episode at all. In fact, it kind of turned me off a little bit. But yeah, Black Mirror, please don't go in this direction. And the fact that both this episode and the Mazey Day episode were the least two popular episodes of the season, and they're very low rated on IMDb, I think is unfair. I don't think those episodes are that bad, but it actually makes me happy, because it makes me feel like they're going to get the messages: do not go in this horror direction. Go back to doing what you do well. Please. So anyway, my rating for Demon 79 out of 10. I'm going to give this one a 7. Very good. It's interesting characters, interesting thought experiments, but even though I don't totally hate the ending, like I totally hate the ending from Beyond the Sea, I still didn't really do it for me. I didn't think it was that great. And it's not. I mean, it's a good episode. It's a good character story. It's interesting, but not really what I want from Black Mirror. So, that is it. Those are all the episodes of Black Mirror. I will give my rating for the season as a whole. And as a whole, I'm going to give this season a 7. Very good. Again, Loch Henry, easily my favorite episode of the season. Definitely a great episode. I think Joan was also awful. Was also a good episode, but a bit too silly for me. But still a good episode. And then Mazey Day was also a good episode in my opinion, even though everyone and their mother disagrees with me apparently. But no, don't do werewolves. And then the Demon 79 thing, again, no, don't go in this horror 70s thing. Like, that's not what I want to see in Black Mirror. And Beyond the Sea, as I said, ending ruined it for me. I'm sorry. So overall, yeah, I gotta give this season a 7, because you got that one episode I really didn't like, and 2 that went in the direction I don't think they should go in, even though they were okay episodes themselves. So give it a 7. Very good. So that is it for my Black Mirror Season 6 review. Now, I have decided, this is something I've been wanting to do for a really long time. I've been wanting to review every episode of Black Mirror. Not review, rank every episode of Black Mirror, because I've seen so many other YouTubers do this, so many other channels, and I disagree so wildly with their rankings, although, as I said, everyone's opinions on this show is so different. Which episodes are good, which episodes are not, or so different from person to person to person. But I wanted to give my rankings, even though I know everyone's probably going to strongly disagree with my rankings, but that's all good. I still want to give them, and so I will be releasing that episode in about a week. Where I'm going to rank. Because, yeah, I've been wanting to do a video for a really long time and never really had an excuse to talk about Black Mirror, but now the new seasons drop. Now I got that excuse. So keep a lookout for that. And also check out my channel as I cover many other shows like Star Trek Next Generation, Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Ahsoka, stuff like that I'll be covering on my channel. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.